Hi there, everybody. I'm Jeff Mayers from WisPolitics.com, here for another one of our virtual lunches. Normally, for this lunch, we'd be at the Madison Club, and we'd have a nice lunch and a lot of good networking, and you'd get to see our special guest in person. But because of the pandemic, we're doing these virtually and hope to get back to doing some in-person events in the later part of this year. I want to thank our sponsors for this Madison Club series. We couldn't do it without you, certainly. Hush Blackwell Strategies, American Family Insurance, Walmart, Excel Energy, ARP Wisconsin, and the Wisconsin Hospital Association. So tomorrow we have an event with the Milwaukee Press Club with the new Milwaukee Health Commissioner. So you can sign up for that at WisPolitics.com. And you can go to WisPolitics.com and see all the events that we have coming up. But today we have a special guest, the new Senate Majority Leader, Devin LeMahieu. Welcome, Senator. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Appreciate the invite to be on the show today.
Yeah, sorry I can't shake your hand and say good to see you, but I'm going to do it virtually. So welcome. So before we get into the news of the day and all the politics in the Capitol, I just want to talk a little bit about you. You grew up around politics. Your dad was an assembly member and member of the Joint Finance Committee, and here you are, the Senate Majority Leader. So what did you learn from your dad?
Well, I learned a lot from my dad even before he was in politics, when I was a young man growing up. But no, I appreciate it. I learned the hard work that he put in, serving and the lifestyle it leads to, going to parades. You're always working when you're in a legislative role. So I got to see firsthand the difference he could make in the district, and yeah, here I am.
Did he ever give you any advice about when you got involved in politics, like, don't do that, or?
He, when I first ran, the Senate and Assembly seats were both open, and he told me not to run for the Senate, and I did anyways. And last fall, when I was talking about running for Majority Leader, he asked why I wanted that headache. So I haven't always followed his advice.
Well, okay, I got to ask the question your dad asked then. Why did you want that headache?
I think it's important to have someone who has time on their hands. I'm a single guy, and I think I have a lot to offer as Majority Leader, being able to travel around the state, support my caucus members, and I think my experience getting to know them over the last 6 years leads me well to serve them in this capacity.
Yeah, you're following somebody who held that position for quite a long time. Scott Fitzgerald, who's now a congressman. What sort of advice did Fitz give you?
He hasn't really given me a lot of advice. Most of what I took from Fitz was just watching how he managed the caucus for the last 6 years. I think he did a great job of not getting out over his skis, not setting the agenda for the caucus, but letting the caucus set the agenda, getting input from different caucus members, and making sure we could all get together on an issue and bring everybody together. So I think that's the most important lesson that I sort of learned from watching Fitz over the last 6 years, that he was sort of calm, didn't get out ahead of things, and worked with the caucus to try bring us all together so we could be united supporting different positions.
Of course, you have a bigger majority than he often did.
Yeah, he helped us get to 21, then brought us down to 20 when he left us. But now we're back up at 21. So it's exciting times that we have a very, very interesting caucus. A lot of newer members. I think we have six freshmen now, with Representative Jagler, Senate-elect. Once he takes his seat, we'll have six of the 21 will be brand new. So a vast wealth of different experiences coming in. So I'm excited about the challenges ahead.
Yeah, some of those are refugees from the assembly. Maybe we shouldn't call them refugees. They graduated from the assembly, maybe is how a senator might say it. But they're not inexperienced with the ways of the Capitol. But being a senator is different with a 4-year term and just sort of the way the Senate works, I guess. Would you agree with that?
Well, I never served in the assembly, so it's hard for me to compare the two. But no, I think it's, I'm not going to compare the Senate to the assembly, but we have great opportunities in the Senate. You're chairing a committee right away. You get a little bigger staff than the assembly. Your district is 3 times as big as the assembly. 3 times the work, but the same pay, as I like to tell my dad. But but no, it's you get to be involved, I think, in a little more committees, broader scopes in our committees. So I think it's a great opportunity for someone to move to the Senate.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of people viewing this may never have even worked at the Capitol. We have people from around the state, but I always tell people, it doesn't matter often whether the same party controls or whether there's different party controlling the houses. The houses act in different ways. No matter really who's in control, and so there is a rivalry of sorts between the houses, no matter what. You okay with my analysis there, or?
Maybe a little bit. My experience, I have 3 great representatives in my district. 2 of us came in at the same time, and the other one, Representative Tittle, was only in office for 2 years before we all came in. So we've all sort of came in at the same time. So we've had great working relationships in the district, worked on legislation with all of my representatives. And, I think there's a lot of that around the state with some recent turnover in both houses, that a lot of newer, fresher faces who are working well together between the houses.
So I think a lot of people who operate the Capitol or are in and around the Capitol are curious as to what is the relationship between you and Speaker Voss in terms of, because there was such a long time between Voss and Fitzgerald, how would you define your relationship with the Speaker?
The Speaker's office and my office have an open line of communication. The Speaker and I talk frequently, and I think we have a good relationship. It'll be a learning curve, just like everything in this job, just getting to know each other's leadership styles, what we're working on. But I think starting out, in all areas, being a new leader, maybe there's a little rocky start, but no, I think we definitely have generally the same goals in mind and same priorities for the state of Wisconsin. So that's an advantage going in, that even though we may not see eye to eye always on specifics, that generally we have the same goal for Wisconsin, same goal for what we'd like to see in the budget, policy wise, and it's just working through the specifics, timelines, getting things through committee, and we'll work through that.
There's some line of speculation that the 2 houses couldn't agree on a budget. Do you buy that?
We agreed on a budget 2 years ago, and I'm hopeful, and I have no doubt that we'll agree on a budget again this year.
So one of the things you mentioned, rocky start, so I didn't even have to use that term, so thanks for that. But so you said rocky start. I think that refers to, you made a deal with the governor and Voss didn't like it. So is that what you're referring to? Well,
just different areas. You come in, you make mistakes, you learn from them. Yeah, I think we had some disagreements on where we wanted to go with AB1, and saw a different path to try get some of those legislative agenda passed in that bill. And I felt it important to actually get a COVID bill signed into law. So we worked with the governor trying to find a solution, because I thought it was important at that point. And, unfortunately, the assembly had some other things they wanted in AB1, and we ultimately came to agreement with the assembly. And unfortunately, the governor vetoed that bill, so we couldn't get that done.
Right, but some of the things that you and he first agreed on eventually got done.
It did, which is great. Yeah, we had two great bills done early in the session. The unemployment bill that had the UI or the liability protections in it, and the tax federal tax bill, making state law conform with federal tax and making sure that the PPP loans weren't taxed. So yeah, we got two great, very important bills done that we're happy that the governor signed into law. Yeah,
well, you obviously do know, but I'm prefacing this question with, there's been a lot of discussion about how the Governor Evers, hasn't really had a great relationship with the legislature, and doesn't even have doesn't often meet in person or online or by phone calls. So when you're reaching out to him, or however that worked, and you made a deal, I think some people found that to be hopeful. That is like, well, hey, maybe they can start playing ball together at the Capitol. I mean, is that a goal of yours in the caucus, to have a better relationship with the governor than maybe what's happened previously?
I think if there's an area that we can work with the governor that's good for the state of Wisconsin, then we should do that. There are, even though we are two different parties and have different interests and different core values that we believe in, we also need to understand that we need to get things done for the state of Wisconsin. So when there's areas where the legislature and the governor can work together, I think we need to do that, which is the approach I took back in January. And when there's opportunities going forward, I'm going to continue to do that. Hopefully we can do that with the budget, find a budget that holds the line on taxes, but also that invests in certain areas so that the governor can get his signature on there like we did 2 years ago. That's my commitment. Unfortunately, it seems like recently the governor hasn't been as willing to work with us with the COVID bills, his emergency orders, not going through the rules process. So with the federal funding, giving no legislative input into where that money is going to be allocated. But when there's I can only control what I do from the Senate standpoint, and when there's areas where we can get together, find common solutions, that's what I'm going to try to do.
Okay, before we get into the federal legislation on COVID money from the feds, let me just put an end to a period at the end of the sentence about this relationship with the governor's office too. So, I mean, do you talk like once a week or once a month, or do you pick up the phone sometimes and say, hey, can we connect and try to talk to the governor personally about things?
My office has reached out to his office at times. I've called him personally at times when there's something I'm curious about or something that I think we can work together. But it's been a while since we've talked.
Okay, well, let me move on then to the Senate and, what happened just yesterday. Let's talk about these 11 bills that passed the Senate in regards to laying out the priorities for Republicans on how $3.2 billion in COVID money should be spent, the money coming from the feds. These bills seem destined for being vetoed. So why go through the exercise of passing these bills?
We think it's very important that the legislature has a voice in how this $3.2 billion is spent. That's why last month we passed the legislative oversight bill, giving JFC passive review over this federal money. Unfortunately, the governor vetoed that. After he vetoed that, Speaker Voss and I sat down together with both of our respective caucuses and developed a plan, sort of a roadmap, if you will, of how we think this money should be spent, because we think all of Wisconsin, especially the legislative branch, should have a voice in this process. We typically, we're the one's responsible for spending. We control the purse. So we think it's very important. And so we were looking at ways to use this money to help out small businesses, help out homeowners, make sure we invest in one-time things in the state of Wisconsin to make sure we're not causing future structural deficits, holes in local levels of government's budgets, holes in the state budget going forward. So we worked together, developed a plan that invests, and I think would be very beneficial for the state of Wisconsin, $500 million into broadband over the next 4 years, investing in water infrastructure, something that's been talked about for ever since I think I've been elected. Investing in roads, infrastructure, something that's going to last for a long time. $300 million, $308 million for local roads, I think would pay a big dividend in the state of Wisconsin. So, that was sort of the game plan behind what we wanted to do to show the governor what we thought was responsible use of these funds. And frankly, if the governor vetoes these bills going forward as we begin to work on the budget, if we don't know how this $3.2 billion is going to be allocated, it's going to make it very tough for us to actually develop a budget and pass a responsible budget because we don't know where this money is going to be spent. It's hard when you're doing a roadmap for the state of Wisconsin when there's this large amount of money that's sitting on the sidelines. It's going to be very difficult for the finance committee to develop a responsible budget. They're sort of flying blind, and it's just going to be very tough to ask taxpayers to vote for a budget when they don't know where a sizable amount of money is going to be spent in the state of Wisconsin.
Okay, so the governor has sole authority over this federal money. He did on the money that came in last year. Is this to say Republicans didn't like how he allocated that money?
I think it's hard to know where he actually allocated all that money when one person through his agencies has sole control over that money. But I think the greater question is, that's when cases were rising and we needed money for testing and things like that. We're now over a year into this pandemic. Vaccines are being distributed. Soon we'll be hopefully at herd immunity. So what are we going to do with this $3.2 billion that's in the state of Wisconsin? And I think it's important that we have in the legislature have a say in how that money is distributed and to make sure that we're being responsible with it.
Okay, so this is one-time money, right? The $3.2 billion. Right. But you're saying it has a very big effect on the 2-year spending plan that the legislature is putting together. We're starting over on the budget that Evers introduced. So if you knew, would you reduce spending for certain programs, even though this is one-time money, like education? If all this money's going, a bunch of money, he sends a bunch of money to education. So then you'd cut the education budget that he proposed. Is that how it would work, or if you knew?
Well, for example, he has substantial investment in broadband in the budget. So why would we fund that in the budget if this federal money can be used for broadband? Local roads, he has a local road program, one-time local road program in the budget. Why would we put that in the budget if this federal money can be used for local roads? I mean, there's all kinds of programs like that. Fixing the lead pipes in Milwaukee. Why would we put that in the budget when this federal money can be used for that? So all these variables going into the process, we need to know the answers. The building commission, some of the federal money can be used for capital expenses. How are we going to pass a capital budget if we don't know what the governor plans to use this money for in a capital budget or for capital projects around the state? So those are a lot of the questions that we're going to have going in. It's not whether we're going to cut programs, cut dish payments if the governor gives money to the hospitals. It's what are the real needs of the hospitals? How much of this money is going to the hospital association? And this is just one example I'm throwing out there, but I mean, that all plays in with each other.
Yeah, so I think you used the term flying blind. JFC is flying blind. And it took months I think, before the CARES money was all distributed. So you're saying give us a concrete list now so the Joint Finance Committee can operate.
Right. Yeah, I think we definitely need a game plan. And I don't think it just needs to be a list, because if there's nothing binding it, then that could be changed down the road as well, which is essentially why we laid it out in statutory form. So that way we're bound to spend the money in these areas. If it's just a random list of, hey, I'm going to put some money into broadband, that could change in a year. So we need to know what that list is. And I think, going back to your previous question, the reason why we're so concerned now over the previous CARES Act money is the numbers have gone up substantially. Going from, I think the CARES Act was $2 billion. Now this one is $3.2 billion on top of over $2 billion going directly to local municipalities. So just the immense scope of the money coming into the state of Wisconsin is so immense. I think it's a little bit reckless from the federal government that this much money is being spread, $1.9 trillion around the globe, or around the country. I think it's reckless, but that money is here. And since that money is in the state of Wisconsin, we need to know where it's going, so that way we can respond appropriately.
All right. So given what you said about it's one-time money, and but here it is. What would you like the state? Yeah, what the legislature is passing 11 bills to say how the legislature wants it. But what would you in general, would you like this kind of one-time money to be used on the state and local level for infrastructure, for all these things, from the repair of UW system buildings like Van Heist to roads and bridges and digital infrastructure? Is that really the place where locals and the state should put the bulk of this money? Investment in the future infrastructure writ large.
Well, I think the state still probably does have some expenses regarding COVID going forward. So we need to understand that. And local levels of government will have those expenses as well. There's absolutely no the 2 whatever million dollars going to local levels, local municipalities, school districts, counties. The state has no say over how that money is being spent. It would be great if the federal government would give guidance to them that they could use it for infrastructure projects. I think that would be beneficial, because if they start using it to budget and plug holes in budgets, that could lead to challenges down the road. But yeah, I think the $3.2 billion that the state has, I think a lot of it should be going towards one-time funding, whether that's in infrastructure or other areas, not filling ongoing expenses, because that leads to problems down the road.
Right, and as you said, some of this guidance from the feds is not there. The Legislative Fiscal Bureau said some of the things that you folks were passing probably wouldn't pass muster. So a lot of this is still up in the air in terms of what exactly the rules are in terms of the money. So we'll find out about that in the weeks ahead. Let me move on about the UW system infrastructure. I mean, I'm sure you know who the president there is, Tommy Thompson. So, he's as a former governor who, lorded over the building commission, he sort of has his eye out for certain things like this. But I guess, he's sounding the alarm on UW system buildings, especially since the slab of concrete fell off Van Heist. And I think that some of the rhetoric from Republicans on the building commission was, well, this is too much of a wish list, the Evers initial capital budget. But does this put the capital budget in a different light, considering what happened there at the Van Heist, and I think what UW System President Thompson's warnings about other buildings on other campuses?
I actually ran into Governor Thompson in the Capitol yesterday, so I had a brief chat with him when he was coming in, and I was on my way out yesterday afternoon. So it was great to see the former governor. The great thing about the budget that we're currently in is we did invest, I believe it was 550 million into building and maintenance at the UW system, which is how they could respond so quickly to what happened at the Van Hise building. So, going forward, we're going to take a look at, making sure for sure the maintenance of buildings is taken care of. And each of the larger building projects I think there's 3 or 4 of them at different campuses. We'll take a look at them, but once again, there was a lot of federal money going into the UW system and all levels of education. So we'll see what the guidance is around spending that money, see if some of that can be used for some of the larger capital projects or how they plan on using that. But, the real reason why I think the important thing is when the Building Commission acted, there is money from the ARPA plan for capital projects, and it was too soon to decide which of those projects might be, and it still is probably too soon to know which of these projects might be able to be taken care of with federal money. And since it was such a substantial amount of money in the budget, we think it's good to go through the entire budget process, see where members are at, and see what a good number is for the capital project.
Yeah, so here comes all this federal money. It's in the hands of the governor. And I think part of what's the subtext here is that Republicans want to find a way to cut taxes in this budget. There's a big surplus going in, even without the federal money. And one of the 11 bills is a property tax rebate, although it's unclear whether that is okay on federal guidance. So, Emma, you're trying to cut taxes in this budget, right? You're going to try to come up with a big tax cut in this budget.
I think it's always important to try to find tax relief for the citizens of the state of Wisconsin. We came through a tough year this last year. Small businesses were hit really hard in the state of Wisconsin. It was a trying time for families. Unemployment spiked during the year. So now is certainly not a time to raise taxes like the governor proposed in his budget, raising taxes by over $1 billion. And definitely when we have a surplus, thanks to sound budgeting that we've done over the last decade, we will be looking at ways to, for sure, hold the line on taxes and find tax relief for the citizens of Wisconsin. I think it's always important to try streamline Wisconsin's tax law any way we can to make things less confusing, more streamlined, more fair. And we'll definitely look at that going through the budget process.
Do you have a tax cut in mind other than the property tax rebate? If that doesn't get approval, maybe that could be part of the budget?
Well, that was a sort of a one-time plan. I think when we get into the budget, assuming the governor vetoes that bill, I think we'll probably be looking more at ongoing changes to the tax law. I think buying down property taxes going forward on an annual basis might not be the best form of tax, giving tax cuts. But I think looking at income tax rates might be a way we go. I'm still interested with some of the members of my caucus as well as eliminating the personal property tax for small businesses. So there are many ways we can go, but we'll see. Obviously we're working with the Assembly, and we'll see where they come in at and try find meaningful tax relief for Wisconsin.
Okay, something else that the Senate did yesterday was pass some measures, follow-ups to the election year. And then there's movement to make put more steps into voting absentee. So the governor has, again, here pretty much drawn a line in the sand that he thinks more people should vote and it should be easier to vote, not harder. But what is the thing that bugs the Senate GOP caucus about the election that needs to be remedied before the next one next year?
Well, I think it is pretty simple to vote in the state of Wisconsin, quite frankly. I think it's one of the easiest states to vote in. We have same-day registration in Wisconsin. You can register to vote online ahead of time. All you need to do is provide a valid ID. So that being said, Wisconsin is a very purple state. Our statewide elections are typically very close. So we think it's very important to have transparent voting, but safeguards in our voting to make sure that, since our elections are going to be so close, that make sure that that fraud isn't happening around the state of Wisconsin. And after making sure that our system is fair and free from fraud, probably the next important thing is to make sure that the citizens of Wisconsin have confidence in the electoral process. And so that's why we need to make sure that we address some of the concerns that happened in the last election. The 4 bills that we passed yesterday seem like great common sense bills. The Democrats didn't even request, I think they only requested a roll call vote on 1 of the 4 bills, and the rest were done by voice. So that means they see that these might be pretty important bills to get done, and making sure that outside money doesn't come into the Zuckerberg bill, making sure that outside money doesn't come into just, a couple areas of the state of Wisconsin to try use the government election process being influenced by outside money. I think that's something we can all agree upon, making sure that observers have access to counting of ballots and recounts. That's something I think we can all get behind. If there's fraud being committed in a county, and making sure a neighboring county can prosecute that or investigate that if the current county that it occurred in is unwilling to do their job and look into potential voter fraud. So I think the bills that we passed yesterday are just common sense bills to build the confidence of the Wisconsin electorate going forward, to make sure that we do have fair elections in Wisconsin.
Okay, you mentioned fraud a couple of times, but there doesn't seem to be much evidence or many prosecutions in the area of fraud in elections. Does there?
I didn't make the claim that fraud occurred during this last election. There may have been some liberties taken with our current election laws, which is also why we're going through this process to make sure that, for example, the cleaning up the voter rolls, the Supreme Court decision this week was unfortunate, but I'm very familiar with that situation. That the voter rolls are supposed to be cleaned up as a result of a law that I actually passed. That was my bill. I think it was my freshman, maybe it was my second term bill I did with then Representative Kathy Bernier. The reason we signed up to be part of ERIC was to clean up our voter rolls, and it's frustrating that it's not being done in the state of Wisconsin. That's why the Joint Audit Committee is going through an audit of the last election process to see what went on with some of these different areas, to make sure that the law was being followed, to check into certain areas. But ultimately, I think it's important that we have clear laws in the state of Wisconsin, laws that whether you're voting in R-Oostburg or Rhinelander or Milwaukee, that you have the same opportunities to vote, that your ballot is treated the same from municipality to municipality.
So, some of your caucus members have complained about the way the Elections Commission is running. I'm wondering, do you have confidence on how the Elections Commission operated in 2020 and going forward?
I think it's clear that the Election Commission needs to go through the rulemaking process when they're issuing some of that guidance, because guidance is only guidance. It doesn't have the force of law. So when they're issuing guidance to Dane County or Sheboygan County or Racine County, that's just guidance on how those ballots can be treated, and clerks can follow that, or they don't have to follow it because it's guidance. So I think it's important that going forward, we have the Elections Commission, when they're making important election decisions, that they go through the rulemaking process. That's why we have the rulemaking process. So, I think that's one thing that we'll be focusing on this session.
All right, well, let's move on to some audience questions. And audience members submitted these questions. I'm going to combine some of them because a lot of them concern one topic, Medicaid expansion. I think that, there's a sweetener, from the feds to try to get the remaining states, including Wisconsin, to do Medicaid expansion. And the legislature has been opposed to that. And I think the signal is you folks are still opposed to it, right?
That is accurate. So
why? Explain that to people. Like, why not take 1.6 billion from the feds and do good things in healthcare?
That's the sweetener is only short term. If we took Medicaid expansion, that would add about 80,000 people to government-run healthcare. About half of those are already eligible for, about 40,000 of them are already eligible for subsidized health care under Obamacare, and the other 40,000 just choose not to take it. So overall, Wisconsin is in the top 10 states for lowest, I'm not explaining this very well, but lowest amount of people who are uninsured. We have very few people who are uninsured in Wisconsin. On top of that, we have incredible quality healthcare in Wisconsin. We're typically ranked in the top 5 in the nation in healthcare. So I think we do, and we don't have a coverage gap. We have healthcare, subsidized healthcare available for all citizens in the state of Wisconsin. So I think we're in a really great position right now in Wisconsin, and to throw a wrench in it by throwing potentially 80,000 more individuals on government-run healthcare, there could be consequences down the road. We've seen other states that have taken the Medicaid expansion, and they've seen budget holes going forward in their health budgets. So I think since we do have such high quality healthcare in the state of Wisconsin, since we are in the bottom or the top 10% in number of people insured, another interesting fact is that the states that haven't accepted the Medicaid expansion, we have the lowest amount of people who are uninsured. So we do a great job with healthcare in Wisconsin, and we're not willing to put more people on government-run healthcare and jeopardize the system we have in place.
Okay, so the 80,000 people who would be on government-run healthcare, you would prefer those people be in Obamacare then, subsidize Obamacare. Would that be the answer for those folks?
Yep, they have that opportunity. About half of them are enrolled in subsidized health insurance through Obamacare.
And in general, do you think the Obamacare is working well in Wisconsin in terms of how OCI is doing it, and in terms of its expanded enrollment period and the increased subsidies? Do you agree with how that's working?
It seems to be effective.
All right, another lightning rod in the governor's budget is the proposal to legalize recreational marijuana. I think you and Speaker Voss and others in the legislature have pretty much said that's dead on arrival. So explain that to people, though. It scores high in polls, and people say, well, if not that, why not at least medicinal? Explain that, why the opposition, why you or your caucus would be opposed to that.
I think there's some societal concerns that you have to consider with that. Well, first of all, we don't have support from the caucus, and that's pretty clear that we don't have 17 votes in the caucus for medicinal purposes or recreational purposes legalize it. It's still illegal at the federal government. The federal government could go through FDA testing, and then we definitely consider, it'd be like any other drug that could be prescribed medicinally. That process is in place, but the federal government hasn't delisted it. And, I think it's actually somewhat important not to pass laws that are in conflict with the federal government. But besides that, I've heard from local employers personally, from, chief of polices, from sheriff's departments, that they all have grave concerns over the consequences of legalizing marijuana. You know, my district is heavily manufacturing. They're concerned that it might have in their workplaces might cause them more problems with people who are high on the job, and if it's more accessible. And you know, even just finding employees right now, our workforce is in certain parts of the state, businesses are even just having a hard time finding people to show up and work. So I think, and you know, hearing from the sheriffs and police chiefs, they just have concerns over you know, trying to enforce it when they pull over people to figure it out if they are, you know, driving under the impaired under marijuana. So, you know, I've concerns about the social, long-term social effects as well.
So, and where are you on medicinal marijuana?
You know, like I said, if the federal government delists it and it goes through FDA testing, you know, then it should be treated like any other drug. If there's advantages to it, if it helps out people, I have no problem with it as long as a doctor's prescribing it. But I think that discussion needs to be done at the federal level and not have some rogue state doing it without actual science behind it.
Okay, so you don't, I mean, some of your Republican colleagues have said, let's pass, if we want to do medicinal marijuana, we'll entertain a separate bill. So you're saying your caucus doesn't even want a separate bill?
No, I don't think we have support at this point.
So does the fact that other states, surrounding states, neighboring states other than Iowa are either have moved to recreational marijuana or appear to be moving, like Minnesota, does that put pressure on Wisconsin, put pressure on legislators?
I mean, it does create, I think it creates law enforcement issues when it's available and when you drive across almost any border. I mean, it does make enforcing more difficult, but I don't think from a policy standpoint, it puts a whole lot of pressure on us.
Okay, so some other questions here. Another one maybe on usage of a drug. Do you see the Senate taking up and passing a bill that raises the state's legal age for tobacco and vape products to 21, as the feds have done?
Yeah, I think it makes sense for the state to actually do that at this point, since it's federal law that it's 21 for tobacco use. I wouldn't see why Wisconsin wouldn't just make sure that their statutes are in line with federal guidelines, statutes.
So here's another question, two healthcare questions. First, how do you think that healthcare and long-term care specifically will fare in the budget? This has been something that's really been talked about during the pandemic.
So in the last budget that we did, we made some substantial investments in healthcare, both for nursing homes, family care. And I think we've seen the benefit of making sure that we're investing in areas that take care of the most neediest among us. And we'll definitely look at that going into this budget to make sure that we can continue to have nursing homes that can operate, to make sure that the neediest among us get the care that they need.
Do you see a continuing place for nursing home care? I mean, there have been efforts in the past to move care like that into the homes, but you know, again, a lot of discussion about nursing homes during the pandemic.
I think there's probably always going to be a need for nursing homes to take care of people when they're can't take care of themselves and they're nearing the end of life.
Right, but should there be more effort to have home care? Because that's some of the effort that's being done with the feds too, I think.
I mean, if there's a way to, I mean, I think that's what family care and some of these other programs have been stressing in the state of Wisconsin. If there's a way to keep people in their homes, to keep them with their families, you know, that's helpful for, I think, anybody's individual health. But at some point there may be a time where they need more high-level healthcare, and that's why we definitely need to make sure that facilities like nursing homes, assisted living communities are there for people who need that level of care.
Right. So it's make sure
Continuum.
all these facilities are available. Okay.
Yep.
Here's a question. What are your priorities for increasing access to mental health services in Wisconsin? And in the words of the questioner, decreasing the over-reliance on crisis and inpatient services. So I guess that's taking care of mental health issues before they become crisis issues.
That's a great question. I think mental health, well, I'll back up. So over the last, 6-8 years, our state has done a great job addressing the opioid issue in the state of Wisconsin, which is probably why you haven't asked me about it yet, because we've done a good job through the HOPE agenda, through Representative Nygren and others, of getting programs out there, awareness and things like that to try address the opioid challenges in the state of Wisconsin. But I've been saying probably for 4 years now that one of the biggest challenges now that there may not be avenues available for people who are struggling with mental health issues, which is why in my second session, I believe it was, I did a bill to allow mental health facilities to operate in schools, breaking down that barrier to try help stem the tide at a young age. And a lot of schools around the state have taken advantage of that program. I'm fortunate enough to have Representative Tittle in my Senate district, who chairs the Assembly Mental Health Committee. So I've had a chance to work with him on different areas. And yeah, we definitely need to make sure that we're continuing to upgrade mental health services around the state of Wisconsin, which is why, Senator Bernier has worked on getting, mental health beds up in her area of the state of Wisconsin. She had a proposal in the last budget to add, I believe, 15 mental health beds up in the Eau Claire area. And the governor vetoed that out of the budget. So we're working on that again this session to make sure that there is programs around the state, both at the front end and back end when things get serious, to make sure that those struggling with these mental health issues have a place to go.
Yeah, again, that's something that's really talked about during the pandemic. Overall, here's a question on the pandemic, and then maybe I'll ask you some questions about that as we close it out. So what specifically did the Senate do? This is a questioner ask, an attendee. What specifically did the Senate do to attempt to work with the governor to deal with the mask mandate? This questioner wants to know if the governor refused to discuss or you just couldn't come to an agreement.
Well, during the first half of the pandemic, I was not the majority leader. So I'm not exactly sure if the governor reached out to Senator Fitzgerald a whole lot. But after the original Supreme Court decision about the shutting down the state came out last spring in May of last year, I remember Senator Fitzgerald talking publicly about the governor coming to us on dealing with the pandemic going forward. What if we saw a spike? What would that look like? And saying we have this rule-making process through the JCRER committee that we can start working on rules. And the governor refused for an entire year to promulgate a rule to work with us on whether it be face masks or gatherings. It's not just about face masks. It's about the power of the executive branch just issuing executive orders, one after another. And the governor never, through an agency, promulgated a rule, never publicly talked about working with us for promulgating a rule. And we've been saying all along, we're willing to work with the governor. We don't know if we'll come to an agreement on anything, but that's why we have the rulemaking process. And that's why the Supreme Court ruled a couple of weeks ago that the governor continuing to issue emergency order after emergency order after emergency order every 60 days goes beyond state statute and the Constitution of the state of Wisconsin. Okay,
so to clarify, so in your view, the legislature wanted a role, tried to gain a role, and the governor rebuffed you in having a role in managing the COVID response.
In regard to, I mean, your original question was regards to mask mandates, you know, we did work with the governor in April to provide a bill to April of 2020, which is a bipartisan bill that the governor signed, which, you know, gave, you know, hospitals the tools they needed to deal with the pandemic and a lot of other different areas. I don't remember exactly what was all in that bill. You know, we set aside some funding that the governor could come to the finance committee for if they needed funding. So yes, at the beginning of the pandemic, you know, we did work with the governor in April of last year to get that bill done. And if you recall, back in December, we were talking about working with the governor on another COVID bill, and that's sort of what we just discussed earlier in the show.
Right. Right. Okay. So I guess what I'm driving at there is, though, that you don't feel that the legislature had a proper role in managing how the state responded to COVID. It was all the governor didn't let you guys participate. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's accurate. He acted unilaterally for almost a year. Okay,
so I guess some people have said, you know, if you're an executive or there's a crisis, you can't wait around for the legislature. Do you see why he may have wanted to sort of like march forward and do what he thought had to be done? Or, you know, he isn't a former legislator, so maybe he just doesn't have that mindset. I don't know.
Well, I mean, that's why state statute allows for 60 days during an emergency for the executive branch to act, so they can have that quick action. But after 60 days, you know, I think since he can move through the rulemaking committee, we can be a little bit more nimble in getting things done at the legislative branch, and the governor refused to do that.
So overall, how do you think the state has come through this? I mean, we're not done with it yet, but I mean, overall, do you think that, I mean, you know, what are the lessons? I mean, how do you think we came through this, other than the executive powers versus the legislative powers?
So I think, you know, now we're a little over a year into it. People have had, we've obviously learned a lot over the last year. Vaccinations we're ahead of schedule in Wisconsin, which is great. Our local Walgreens hospitals have done a great job in getting out those vaccinations around the state. And, you know, I trust in people to educate themselves and make their own decisions. I don't think at this point the government needs to tell people, you know, how to respond to the pandemic, since we're a year into this. So I think it's great that people are getting vaccinated. It's great that people are starting to maybe not be business as usual, but starting to go back to stores, go back to restaurants. And since we're a year into this, we know how to do that safely. We don't need, you know, the governor to tell people how to do that. We don't need DHS to mandate how that happens in the state of Wisconsin, because we've taken precautions. Gas stations have put up plexiglass, you know, stores have put up plexiglass. People are vaccinated. So I think we're in a great place in Wisconsin. Budgetarily, we're also in a fantastic place in Wisconsin, despite the pandemic and despite unemployment jumping to over 13.5% in just a couple of weeks in Wisconsin. We're back down under 4% in Wisconsin. We're going to have a $2 billion budget surplus at the end of this budget, which despite going through a pandemic. So I think the state, from a financial standpoint, from a business standpoint, has recovered very well, despite certain sectors of the economy being shut down for 2 months.
So you mentioned before about, you know, you represent a district heavy in manufacturing. What do you think the business community needs right now? You know, what's its most pressing need for businesses, manufacturers, and others to thrive in the rebound here? You talked about workforce. Is that, you know, that was the issue before the pandemic-induced recession. So are we back to workforce? Is that the major issue that's facing businesses right now, or is it just, you know, need a bridge loan, or what do you think is the biggest issue for businesses?
Yeah, I think it is workforce, finding employees willing to work. Some of the things the federal government has done to incentivize people to stay on unemployment hasn't helped things out. So that's definitely a factor in driving that workforce. But another area which was also an issue prior to the pandemic is just housing in some areas of the state, finding affordable housing. So we'll be looking at that, ways to incentivize affordable housing. Some people call it workforce housing, but affordable housing, so that people can move into the Sheboygan area, people can move into the Wausau area, and I think it's a dual problem: is having the workforce available, making sure they're willing to work, but then also when you attract people into your area, making sure that they can actually find a house or find a rental unit to move in.
Well, right, but some of that's because of just lack of supply. So you're talking about making it easier to build some sort of make it easier to build apartments or single family homes, or I'm not sure where are you going with that.
Yeah, it's very expensive to build a home. Some of it's tied to local regulations, some of it's tied to other regulations. So if we can streamline the regulatory aspects, that'd be beneficial. But it also doesn't help that the cost of the supplies of building a house have increased somewhat dramatically recently. Some of that I think is a response to what the federal government's doing. We're starting to see inflation around in different areas. When the federal government continues to print money at an unprecedented rate, inflation is going to result at some point. We're starting to see it in different sectors, in groceries as well, but also in lumber and things like that. So, we need to make sure that we can, whether it's apartments or affordable housing, that someone, making a median income in the area can afford to buy, because otherwise you can't get people to move to your area if there's no place for them to live.
Okay, now my last question is from me. I'm not sure everybody knows this. You own a weekly newspaper in the Sheboygan area, the Lakeshore Weekly, and so you're a member of the media. So what bugs you about the media other than my clumsy questions that I've been asking here?
Well, my paper is more of a shopper than a newspaper, so I don't know if I consider myself part of the media. But I think my bigger frustration with the media is just sort of some of the stories they choose. And I understand the nature of the business, that conflict often is what sells newspapers or brings viewers to your station. But there's so much that we do in government, especially in the state of Wisconsin, that has bipartisan support, where we do work together. And it seems like the coverage of areas when we do have bipartisan support, that the governor signs bills, often isn't covered. And I understand that that's not as interesting as when we're fighting with each other, but I'd like to see the media cover more positive stories going forward.
All right, well, you're on the record then for positive stories. So this is a positive story. You had a good run here for an hour. Really want to thank you, Senator, for joining us. It was a pleasure. Again, wish I could shake your hand and thank you, and wish the crowd could applaud. But when we're back in person, we'll welcome you back to one of these, I hope. So let's stay in touch on that. And thank you very much. Want to thank our audience for attending today. To let you know also, there's an event tomorrow with the new Milwaukee Health Commissioner in cooperation with the Milwaukee Press Club. But I want to thank our sponsors for the Madison Club series, the Wisconsin Hospital Association, ARP Wisconsin, XL Energy, Walmart, American Family Insurance, and Hush Blackwell Strategies. And a special thanks to Senate Majority Leader LeMahieu and his staff for making this possible. So we'll see you next time. This is Jeff Mayers from WisPolitics signing off.